Chinese were flying their airplanes over Hainan, there was always a chance that they were going to come out and try to intercept some reconnaissance guy up there too. So we were escorting this EC-121. Like every other accident, or most other accidents, a combination of little things, none of which should have been enough to cause you to get in the wrong place at the wrong time. But when you add them all up together, we apparently had a communications, navigation, and identification system failure. The compasses went goofy, and we ended up over clouds, over land, which is a no-no in the first place. You're not supposed to be over clouds or anything. And a surface-to-air missile from a site further south than we knew anything about was fired. Nobody saw it or anything like that. Just a loud bang, and the airplane quit flying. And I looked over at my mirror up at the pilot who's sitting in front of me, and he gives me a thumbs up. At least I thought it was a thumbs up, because, usually if you look at him, couldn't communicate with him, the ICS was out, but he gives you a thumbs up. That might mean, okay, we got a problem, but we're going to be okay.
We're still flying.
In this case, this thumbs up meant I'm out of here. Because he ejected before I did, and there's no stick, control, or anything in the back seat. So what I was involved in was a lead sled.
Your first
Quiet.
flight.
This is my level of technology. It's called a flip phone. Maybe you guys remember these. I do not have a cell phone. I have that's my cell phone. Anyway.
You find yourself in something with a glide path of a brick.
Yeah, it's pretty much. The altimeter was unwinding pretty fast, but at least it wasn't doing cartwheels or anything like that. So I estimate that I ejected about 10,000 feet. The canopy on an F-4 is about 1.5 inches thick. You cannot eject through it. You have to get rid of the canopy. On the checklist, you go down about 4 different things, and I was down to the one just before the last. And the last thing is you take out your survival knife and start hacking away at it to chop your way through it. That probably wasn't going to happen either. But the next to the last thing was, if you can't get rid of it any other way, you pull a lever and hope that the wind stream flying by at 275 miles an hour is enough to get the canopy off. And it did. I pulled that handle, and the next thing I knew, I woke up in my parachute. The only problem was I was blind. At least I thought I was blind until I put my hands up and discovered my helmet had gotten twisted 180 degrees, and I was looking into the back of the helmet instead of out the front. So then I just was able to determine I was right over the coast, that I would, so I was in the water, never got my face wet even. Guys in a boat were coming out to pick me up. I was in the water maybe 10 minutes. We beat it back to the shore. As soon as it got dark, they put me in the back of a Jeep. Drove all night up to Hanoi.
I was going to say, you neglected to mention that they weren't on our side.
Oh no, there was certain universal language. This is a guy standing up in the front of this little log boat with an AK-47 and a bad look on his face. And he goes, your hands go to the I give up position.
Air Force.
Air Force salute.
Yep, Air Force. You pick out the Airedale.
I know, no. It was I'm going to tell you about the 38 pistol, that they issue you a revolver when you're a flight personnel. And when they do that, the first thing they instill in you is the fear of God, in that you are responsible for this weapon. And if it ends up in Chicago with some guy robbing a 7-Eleven, you are going to get the pleasure of explaining to the FBI how the hell it was that your 38 made it to Chicago. So I wanted to be able to verify, when I filled out that form, that my 38 had been jettisoned at sea. So I took that out of my little holster, never raised it above the surface of water, quickly transferred it over here and threw it in the water as far as I could, because I wanted to be able to fill out that form. He never asked me what happened to my people. I was really disappointed. Well, anyway, I got 6 o'clock the next morning. This Jeep pulls up in front of a big wall, stone wall, bad looking place. A door swung open and they marched me in there, and that was literally the Hanoi Hilton, the old French prison in downtown Hanoi that had been built like 1880, 1890, something like that. And, you know, your world had changed. I remember saying, oh my, I'm going to be a POW. Because we knew there were guys, you know, that had been shot down. Everett Alvarez, who was shot down in August of '64, that was before we ever left San Francisco on that Ranger cruise. And there were a couple of guys, we didn't lose anybody on the Ranger cruise, but on the Enterprise cruise, we'd had a couple of guys shot down at earlier raids here. There was quite a change in the way the war was going from the 64, 65 to 65, 66. It was a lot hotter war. It was again, there are certain things that are key to survival. And again, communications is the number one thing. The area in which the Vietnamese stuck you when you first got there was this little hallway about 15 feet long. It had 4 cells on each side. Each cell was about 5 feet wide, 8 feet long. You could take 4 steps before you turned around. 1, 2, 3, 4, about face, 1, 2, 3, 4. They had a guard in this center hallway all the time because they didn't want people talking to one another. And that was your introduction to what your life was going to be like now. Now, occasionally that guard, I guess, would have to go get a drink or go to the bathroom or whatever. And one of the guys that was in one of those cells took a chance of, I don't know whether you'd say whispered or hollered or whatever, but he communicated to, what's your name, where are you from, and do you know about the TAP code? And if you remember seeing some old James Cagney movies or something like that, James Cagney was often, he was a little short guy anyway, and he'd be in these movies about prisons and places, and he seemed to be cast in all those kind of roles. And he'd be some short little guy with a raspy voice and just meaner than hell. But they'd talk about prisoners in prisons tapping on with something on the water pipes, and that's how they communicate between cell blocks. It turns out that's a true story. It's based on an honest-to-God code that prisoners have used for communication for hundreds of years. And if you take the 26-letter alphabet and start arranging the letters in a row, from your perspective, A, B, C, D, E across the first row, then you drop down the row, you got F, G, H, I, J. So any letter can be designated by what row it's in and what column it's in. And there's a universal American, everybody's heard this, shaving a haircut. Well, that's how you communicated to the guy next to you that you wanted to talk, you know, to tap on the wall. So when that guy thought it was safe or whatever, he'd come over the wall and go, the 2 bits. So you go, second row, 3rd letter. F, G, H. I. H, I.
Right.
A light bulb comes on. Somebody connects up 2 letters, H, I. Hi! And literally, that's sometimes how it worked out. For some people, they didn't get up there in one day. There were guys that took them a month to get from wherever they were shot down to get up to Hanoi, and where they would have contact with other Americans. But when the light bulb came on and they realized that somebody was trying to make contact with them, it was like your whole world changed. And you try to solicit information from them. First of all, what the guy's name was, what service he was. If he was a Navy guy, you'd say, what ship are you off of? And, and then you tell him the news. And you make it sound like it was real easy. It's laborious as hell sometimes. But, and there are some aspects of the prisoner situation that are kind of dog eat dog. When you're the new guy, the spotlight is on you. Your captors, they want to, hey, you may know something we'd like to know. And so you get this interrogation. We called it quiz because we used to joke that Air Force guys couldn't spell interrogation, but they could spell quiz. And it's a lot simpler to tap Q-U-I-Z through the wall than it is to try to spell out interrogation. So you go to quiz, and the guy, they start out with the name, rank, serial number, and date of birth. But it's not like in the movies or a training situation. They don't stop there when you say, I'm sorry, I can't answer any more of your questions. And you always say, oh, you don't think so, huh? Whack, whack, whatever it takes, And there was nobody up there named John Wayne or Robert Mitchum or any of these historic tough guys, or Clint Eastwood even. Anybody can be forced to do whatever you want them to if you've got enough time and enough little guys to make their life hell. But anyway, most of the things that you bring back from that experience don't have anything to do with the actual, getting your arms twisted in funny directions or getting beat up or whatever. Getting beat up is a little bit of a radical concept. But really, in a couple of weeks, you can get beat up pretty good. But the black and blue spots will go away, the scrapes will heal and stuff like that. The physical aspects of captivity are a lot easier to deal with than the mental ones. The isolation, the fear of the unknown is very real. You always wonder, well, what are they going to do with you next? I can remember one of the first things I did, I think even before I got to Hanoi, I chewed my fingernails down as short as I could literally chew them. Because what have we always heard? They talk about, the bad guys take a pair of pliers and pull your fingernails out. Well, you try to make, that's the kind of crap that goes through your mind when you're in that situation. You just, you get a lot of weird thoughts. You do whatever you can. It's, when you're the new guy, you're going to have the spotlight on you and everything. And then guess what happens? Some other poor guy is going to get shot down, and the emphasis is going to switch from you to him. It's dog-eat-dog world, and one of the things about it is that you have almost no control over your day-to-day life and experiences. Now, to a greater or lesser extent, some guys would say, hell, that's the way it was when I was in the Army, I didn't have any control over what was going on. Well, it's all relative. Life is relative. And that's kind of the way it is too. Yeah, you're right. There are some things that don't work out quite like you want them to do if you're just on, in your unit or whatever. An aside here is, in today's Navy, people do not know what a Liberty Card is. Are any of you guys old enough to know about what the hell a Liberty Card is? Yes, I'll bet. In a squadron or on a ship, the ship's crew is divided up into like 3-section or 4-section Liberty. So Liberty section 1, 2, 3, or 4. Or the duty section 1, 2, 3, or 4. If it's a duty day for your group, that means you're not going to go to shore tonight. You're the guys that are on board during the off normal hours that in case something needs to be done, you're going to do it. Well, even if you weren't in the duty section, before you could leave the ship, you had to show your Liberty Card at the gangway so that the security guys there knew that you were authorized to leave the ship. You had to be back at 10 o'clock or whenever Reveille or TAPS was or anything, but you could get off the ship. Well, guess who? You didn't just get to keep that Liberty Card in your pocket. Your chief, petty officer, maintained the Liberty Cards. So at the end of the day, and you said, hey, Chief, I'm really looking forward to going into town tonight. can I get my Liberty card? And he'd go to his 3x5 box and, damn, are you sure you turned that in last time? I don't see your Liberty card in here. Well, look again there, Chief. So the chief goes in here again. Damn, Smith, I can't find your Liberty card. I guess you're going to have to stay on board tonight.
And finish that little job you were supposed to do.
Got a little, yeah, we got a couple of little extra jobs I need some help with anyway. How would you like to help with that? Service record or anything, but that's the chief's way of making sure that you get the word that goofing off like you were doing yesterday, there is a cost associated with that.
Character building.
If he, yeah, or character building, or if you, that's, at least if the chief did it, you probably weren't going to get shanghaied out in the passageway someplace. I've seen plane captains or something like that take care of some of those little matters on their own. Guys in the shop, you know, and I'm sure it's the same way in the Army, places like that too. But anyway, you know, it's a learning experience, and you don't always get to be in control, and you certainly don't get to be in control when you're under somebody else's control. Some guy tapped on the wall one day, "Help, I'm being held captive by a group of demented Boy Scouts," because the guards in the prisons and stuff looked like they were about 14 or 15 years old. In the springtime, when we assumed it's when their school was over for the year, or, you know, in the spring at the end of the school year, they'd get a new crop of guards in the camp. Man, they were really green, and they would do whatever. But there are some things about life that are, you know, pretty much remain true no matter where you are. And this is where some of the grandmotherly wisdom comes in. When your grandmother says to you, "I don't care whether you like it or not. You don't have to like it. You just have to eat it." You know, I hear stories about youngsters these days who are, little Jimmy doesn't like whatever the rest of the family's having. It's not unique to that. So his mother makes macaroni and cheese for little Jimmy because he likes macaroni and cheese. He could eat that every day. I don't know about your moms or grandmas, but that wouldn't have sold in my mom's or my grandma's house. If what they fixed for dinner, that's what you were having for dinner tonight, or it was going to be a hungry evening.
Eat or starve, the choice is yours.
We had guys in Hanoi that would say, we've had spinach soup twice a day for 3 months. I am not eating any more spinach soup. Okay, that's your option. But the food in Hanoi ran in 4-month cycles. You had 4 months of spinach soup in the summer, then you had 4 months of cabbage soup in the fall and early winter, and you had 4 months of pumpkin soup from about Christmas until April. Now, we called it soup. Pumpkin soup was made by taking a pumpkin and an implement kind of like a paint scraper. You know, back in the old days when your parents, they used to paint the windowsills with that white enamel paint that houses were painted in, the trim back in the day, as they say in the saying. And you used a paint scraper that had kind of a curved blade, and that's what they used to take that, just the very outside off of a pumpkin. Put it on a chopping block, take a machete and give it about 4 whacks, and pitch it into a big pot of water. Voila, pumpkin soup. Or cabbage soup. Whack, 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 head of cabbage in there. So it was water and whatever it was. We called it spinach. All I can tell you for sure, it was a green, tubular plant that grew in a pond outside the camp where the water buffaloes lived.
And
Thank God they boiled it. They boiled it, and they boiled the water we drank. But hauling the food around and stuff was, they had women who worked in the camp, and they, with a chogi pole and a couple of baskets, that's how they carried the soup around in. That's what they carried the bread or rice, whatever you had in. And the more, if they gave you a full ration of water, that meant they were going to have to walk back and forth to wherever the kitchen was more times. I swear to God, if we had one of these full in 24 hours, we were really lucky. So guys would drink any water they could get a hold of. When we had the bathing facilities were a well and a bucket. You would pull up a bucket of water on this rope, dump it over your head, soap up, one more bucket of water to rinse with, that was it. Well, guys drank that water. Guess what? When we came home, we almost all were filled with internal parasites, to use the your lungs, that's where the smallest blood vessels in your body are. They said our lungs would glow in the dark because we had so many bugs and stuff that was all trapped in our lungs. But it didn't kill you.
Not right away.
No. And they have medication that'll cure most of that. It was funny. I spent a full month in the hospital in San Diego when we came home. And this medication every 8 hours for 14 days. And you can't have any alcohol because it's incompatible with some of this medication. By golly, I don't care. My mom didn't care how old I was. By God, she was still running the show. And that's what I did. So I never had a reinfestation once I got rid of the bugs the first time. But for years down at Pensacola, there'd be guys come down there and they'd do their blood test and fecal samples and stuff like that. And guess what? They still had bugs. Because the guys whose family were in San Diego, they didn't stay in that hospital for 30 days. They may have stayed there the first night. After that, they went home every night. And I'm sure when the guys from the neighborhood came over and stuff, they weren't taking their pills because they were drinking beer or wine or whatever. So there were guys that had bugs for years. Didn't have any things of that. So, you know, life thing. The most often asked question in Hanoi is, when are we going to get the hell out of here? And some new guy would come in and you get established communications. You ask him, when are we going to get out of here? And they would almost always say, oh, McNamara says we're kicking the dickens out of them. We'll be home in 6 months. Or certainly by Christmas.
Always by Christmas.
Always by Christmas. That's the carrot that dangles out in front of you. You'll be home for Christmas. Well, and if we don't make it by this Christmas, certainly next Christmas. You know, no sweat. If they tell you the day you checked in how long it was going to be, you would have said, oh my, I don't think maybe I want to sign up for this program. Guess what? That's not an option. So, eventually, you were home. Didn't make it for Christmas of 1972, but we came real close. Apparently, they came pretty darn close to signing an agreement in November of 72. And then the Vietnamese said, well, we're not sure we want to do this. That's when President Nixon told the Joint Chiefs to go do, it's called Operation Linebacker, and that was the B-52s over North Vietnam. And those are the guys that ended the war. Air Force fighter pilots didn't have many good words to say for B-52 pilots. You know, they were bus drivers, they were doing all the bad names that Air Force fighter pilots. In the Air Force, if you aren't a pilot, you know, you're not crap. And the fighter pilots are the epitome of that. But the B-52 guys are the ones that ended the war. I have a good friend down in St. Louis who flew 35 missions over North Vietnam in B-52s in late 72 and early 73. And he's the guy I buy a drink every time I see him and thank him for ending the war. The only time that getting to Hanoi early was a good deal was that when they signed the agreement, it stipulated in there that the prisoners would be exchanged in the proportion to the U.S. troop withdrawal from South Vietnam. And once that agreement was signed, they started flying airplanes into Saigon and Da Nang and bringing guys out of there by the airplane load. And in the first 2 weeks, apparently 25% of the American combat forces had been withdrawn because on February 12th, that was the first day of POW releases, and there were 125 people repatriated on February 12th. That's the only time that getting there early was a good deal because the agreement stipulated that the prisoners would be released, sick and wounded first, followed by the other prisoners in the order in which they had been shot down. So that's the only time that the guys got there early. It was a good deal. And, they spent the first year arguing from 68 to 69 over what will the shape of the table be. Will it be round, oval, square? They weren't, that's a whole other story. But anyway, so we got on the airplane. I was on the third airplane out of Hanoi. We went from there to Clark Air Force Base. They had emptied everything in the hospital except the maternity ward. They were pretty sure they weren't going to need that. And they had prepared for anything. They didn't know whether we'd have contagious diseases, whether we'd be able to eat normal food, any of those things. So it was about probably 7 o'clock or something like that when we got on to Clark. They took an Air Force bus from the plane where we got off the airplanes back to the hospital. They said, okay, just find a bed, put your stuff on it, take a shower, put on a pair of pajamas and a bathrobe, and come down to eat. I ever talked to said when you asked them what they had to eat that first night at Clark, it was breakfast, steak and eggs. Your imagination, you can imagine anything else to be kind of lunch and dinner. You can say, oh, this is macaroni and cheese, it's goulash, it's spaghetti, or whatever. It's hard to simulate breakfast. An American breakfast is unique. Europeans don't eat breakfast like we do. So most guys went down, had steak and eggs, and a banana split for dessert. And that was our introduction to food. And I don't remember anybody getting sick. Maybe they did, but...
Until the next morning. The grease in the steak didn't go well with an awful lot of guys.
Well, you wouldn't think so, but man, and they didn't give us any special diet, the Vietnamese, as we were getting ready to come home. They just... It had been pretty much normal activities right up until the night before we came home. It was funny, on the ramp there in Hanoi, they had tables just like these. They had painted a white line on the ramp out in front of the base ops area. And they had a row of tables across it like this top of a T. And on one side were all Vietnamese people sitting. On the other side of the white line at the table were all American guys. And everybody had a notebook in front of them. So they marched us up to the side of the Vietnamese side of the table here, and one of the officers from the camp was at a microphone. And he read the names of each of the people that was there. And they had you rank in order. They knew exactly what the hell was going on. They didn't recognize rank, or you were all just dumb shit as far as they was concerned, but they knew who was senior to who and all that sort of stuff. So the guy reads your name, you step across the white line, and at the table, almost everybody had a pen in their hand, and they all make a check mark by your name as you transferred from Vietnamese control to American control. And there was a smiley-faced Air Force public affairs officer who greeted you as you stepped across the white line. In the Navy, you don't salute unless you have cover on. Air Force didn't worry about that, but we didn't have a cover on, but by golly, we saluted that Air Force guy. And then he would point at the airplane and you start walking. And they had this line of guys, had no idea what they were doing. They looked like they all had on paratrooper boots, and they were in really spiffy looking uniforms and everything. The guy that was at the head of the line would come hustling over to you, put his arm around your shoulders and shake your hand, lean over and talk to you as he walked you back to this airplane. Then, man, that's about the friendliest guy I ever saw. I wonder what the deal is with him. We got on board the airplane. It was a C-141, medevac and everything. They had nurses on board there. They had milkshakes in the freezer and stuff like that. And somebody asked one of these nurses, who was that guy that walked back here to the airplane with me? And the nurse smiled and said, that guy was there to make sure that you didn't faint and embarrass yourself by falling in a puddle right there on that ramp. They were that squared away that this guy was prepared to escort you back to the back of that airplane, whether you were able to put one foot in front of the other or not. Because they just didn't know what kind of shape we were going to be in. They thought it was literally possible that some guys, with the emotion of the moment and everything, would be, you know, you would faint. And I can understand them thinking that. And if we had only been there 3 or 4 years, I think that would have been more likely. The primary emotion when we got the word that, hey, some guys are going to go home tomorrow and everything, there wasn't a big hooping and hollering and elation and guys jumping up and down and everything. It was like people sat back, took a deep breath and says, well, it's about darn time. That we had worked our way through that emotional highs and lows of being through that and everything. We had been reached pretty much of a solid state situation where, you know, I'd been happy, I've been glad, I've been sad, you know, all that kind of stuff. But over a period of time, it's and everything. But I can tell you that some guys reacted one way and some guys reacted 180 degrees out. It was real, if you could take a step back again and just observe, it was a hell of a learning experience. And I think I'm better for it. I'm very fortunate. I don't have any health problems that are directly attributable to that. And it's like, you know, I don't have diabetes and I don't have that. I've got a lot of little things, but doesn't kill you, you know. And I've reached a stage in life where the philosophy of my wife and I is, don't screw it up. You know, life is good. Let's not climb up on step ladders and step off at the wrong step or something like that, you know. Just be a little bit careful about things and don't screw it up. So, enough from me. Thank you very much for your listening and inviting me to be here today. I think there's a lot to be gained by these regional meetings and everything. And just remember, you know, you may get a few unique situations that come up, but it's not very likely that somebody hasn't experienced them. All you got to do is find the right person